This is episode 74 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and for the second straight episode, I have a guest on the show who once lived here in Saskatoon. He's the founder of HeavyHockey.com and the host of Oilerslive, Michael. Michael, how was your trip to my hometown last week?
No, it was fantastic. Yeah, always great to go to Saskatoon. I feel like it's a bit of an underrated city because it's in the middle of the prairies. It's a beautiful city, lots of bridges, lots of nice green space. Yeah, I always enjoyed being there.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And it was great to catch up and see you for the first time since the Heavy Hockey Showdown back in March. And, it's also great that Oilers hockey is almost back. This off season has been way too long. And I think the way last season ended left a bitter taste in everyone's mouth. So Oilers fans are definitely eager for the new season to get going. And I think the excitement around the team grew even more when 18 players showed up to the first day of captain skates on September 5th. How encouraging was that for you to see almost the entire team back on the ice together 2 weeks ahead of training camp?
Yeah, I lots has been made about this and the captain skate and everybody being there. I think when you look at a team and you start to see patterns in what makes teams successful, it usually boils down to commitment and leadership. And those two things are apparent when everybody shows up for the captain skate, ahead of time and is ready to go. And it looked like they had a great time too. Not not just not just getting down to business, but it looks like they're gelling as a team early.
Definitely. I think it just shows how serious this group is about winning the Stanley Cup this year. They've lost to the eventual champions in back-to-back years, and they want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And even though these are just informal practices, you can tell from the videos that have been shown on Twitter that they're going full out. And even from listening to the various media availabilities so far, everyone sounds extremely focused and super motivated. And as a fan of this team, that's a great sign.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And although we're less than 4 weeks away from being able to talk about actual games again, tonight we're going to be recapping the Oilers' biggest offseason moves. And since I'm planning to have Spencer Pomodi on the show next week to talk about the Oilers' top prospects, we'll skip right over the NHL draft and ahead to the 2023 NHL awards, where Connor McDavid matched the NHL record for most individual awards in a single season with 4. McDavid took home the Art Ross Trophy as scoring champion, the Maurice Rocket Richard Trophy as goal scoring leader, the Hart Memorial Trophy as most valuable player, and the Ted Lindsay Award as most outstanding player as voted by the NHLPA. Michael, if the rest of the NHL is here on Earth, McDavid is in another universe right now, isn't he?
Well, you got to think. I mean, he's like any superstar of his caliber. He's incredibly humble, and we'll talk about the team behind him. And certainly the team is really good, but he just has a commitment to being the best that you don't see in everybody else. And it's, I'd say it's a quiet commitment, but it's not, because just look at everybody showing up for the captain skates. So he's, it's the kind of thing, the 60 goals mark, 60 goal mark, it just shows what he's capable of. That when he decides he wants something, he goes out and does it. And we haven't seen that for a very long time.
Oh, without question. I mean, last season really was a season for the ages from him. McDavid dominated the competition like no player in the past quarter century. He was only the sixth player in NHL history to record 150 points in a single season, and he won the scoring race by 25 points, which was the largest margin of victory since Wayne Gretzky in 1990-91. McDavid joined Gordie Howe, Phil Esposito, Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, and Jaromir Jagr as the only players in NHL history with 5 Art Ross trophies. Additionally, he was the first player to win 3 consecutive Art Ross trophies since Jagr from 98-99 through 2000-2001. McDavid also joined Bobby Orr, Bobby Clarke, and Gretzky as the only players in NHL history with 3 Hart trophies at age 26 or younger. And he joined Gretzky and Lemieux as the only players in NHL history with 4 Ted Lindsay Awards. He became the first Oiler to lead the league in goals since Gretzky in 86-87, as you mentioned, him hitting the 60-goal mark. And perhaps most impressively, McDavid became only the 5th player in NHL history to lead the league in goals, assists, and points in a single season, and the first to do so since Gretzky also in 1986-87. And I just think that uh, the all-time greats have this innate drive to go above and beyond, and that's what we've seen from McDavid throughout his entire career, but especially last season. And we can talk about all the offensive milestones and trophies that he's won, but it's like you said, getting everyone back in town ahead of schedule and getting them into the captain skates and not letting this opportunity to be ready going into training camp slip by. That just shows, I think, that his leadership qualities have even taken a step forward, as well as his offensive game just continuing to grow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and he's a year older, right? I mean, it's hard to think of a guy at 26 years old being mature, but he has matured. He's matured, not just as a player, but as a leader. You see, how he talks to the media. He's a lot more relaxed than he's ever been. He seems to be a little bit more open in the right ways, if you will. And, some of that might be his engagement to Lauren, who knows, but he's settling down and he's showing everybody that he's got what it takes and that he's ready to take the next step. It's fun to watch. And we've been, lucky enough to see him in his whole career as an Oiler.
Yeah, when you have a player with his incredible combination of speed and skill, but also that internal drive to win. I mean, he wants to win more than anyone out there. Just uh, to have a guy with that amount of talent and also who hates to lose. It's a great combination for Oilers fans and frightening probably for the rest of the league.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to look at it that way, right? It's got to be a little bit frightening for the rest of the league. And we could talk about McDavid all night. But he's got another guy behind him that's hates to lose just as much, and I think really pushes him. I think the two of them, while McDavid is undoubtedly the best player in the league, Leon Draisaitl is a big part of that and how he pushes McDavid to want to be better. Just the off the cuff remarks and everything that show there's a fire and a will to do better. I think that the two of them are best friends. They're ride or die, as they say. That just works for them, and they'll push each other. They were at the BioSteel camp together. They do a lot of things together in the summer, and that little bit of an extra is just enough to kind of give us what we see every day. I think not that McDavid wouldn't be special on his own, but I think he's even more special because of the guys behind him.
Oh yeah, and it's just it's an incredible thing for the Oilers to have the two best players in the league on one team. And when you have a player like Draisaitl, like you mentioned, pushing McDavid in practice every day, and it also you can have Leon Draisaitl on any given night. He can be the best player in the world.
Oh yeah.
I remember Todd McClellan when he coached the Oilers telling Leon that don't just accept being the second best. You yourself try to be the best player on any given night, and we've seen that over the years where Leon Draisaitl can take over a game, and he's there are things he can even do better than Connor. Like McDavid is probably still considered the better playmaker, but the way that Leon's able to execute on some of those long range passes, especially on the backhand, his incredible finishing ability on the power play from the low in the right dot. He's easily one of the best players in the world, and it goes beyond McDavid and Draisaitl too. Just practicing together day after day, that whole team. I think that it will make the Oilers defensemen also better having to play against those guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they've talked about it, right? Like defensemen on the Oilers always talk about how in practice, they're learning things all the time, and you just have to be when you go into practice and you're playing against McDavid and Draisaitl, you have to be on even at practice. right? Like there's no time. There's no time to take, a day off or a minute off when you're with these guys, and that's I think it's great. I think the young guys will grow up in the league and they'll be better for it. And we've seen that. We've seen the maturation of some of the players, like Bouchard and we saw Desharnais throughout the season. There's no doubt that having two guys out there that can really make you see what's possible is bound to rub off on you as a defenseman.
Definitely. And despite a clean sweep at the NHL awards this summer, McDavid fell one vote short of being named the unanimous MVP for the second time in 3 years. How surprised were you to see him receive one fifth place vote to go along with his 195 first place ballots?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, I guess, right? Like there's Gretzky had it too. When you're the best, there's always going to be folks out there that find a reason to say you are not the best. It seems every year there's a reason or some reason why folks need to, in the Professional Hockey Writers Association, find a reason to vote somebody else the Hart Trophy winner. And it's never about, is McDavid good enough or the right guy to win the Hart? It's about why shouldn't we vote McDavid for the Hart? And so it's bound to be, out of that many people that vote, there's bound to be one. And in this case, there was. It's I think it's shameful, but it is what it is, and it's never going to be a big surprise. There are still folks out there who don't think McDavid's the best in the league, despite the fact that he continues to prove it night in and night out.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, McDavid's been the best player in the league since his second year in 2016-17. If you want to argue that Crosby held the title for a little bit longer, even though McDavid was putting up more points, okay, fine. But there's no question that in the last 5 years that McDavid has been the best player in the world. And look, everyone's going to have their own opinion on this, but look, David Pastrnak was the best player on the best regular season team in NHL history last year. But I don't know how anyone in the PWHA could look at the staggering numbers McDavid put up and not think that he was the most valuable player to his team. I mean, he had the highest single season point total in nearly 3 decades. He won hockey's version of the Triple Crown. He set or challenged for several NHL records. So it was a little disappointing that he missed out on being a two-time unanimous winner by one vote, because that would be something that he had done that even Gretzky never accomplished in his career. But ultimately, McDavid still took home the Hart, and that's what should be most important to Oilers fans.
Yeah, and I don't even think, I struggle with this because the Hart is great, but it's voted on by writers. And to me, the Ted Lindsay, if I'm a player, that's the one I care about,
And
right?
McDavid even
And
said that in an
yeah,
interview at the NHL Awards, that this is the trophy that he holds in the highest regard because he's voted on by his peers.
hmm and so winning that one 4 times, to me, that's a pretty big deal. By 26 years old, that alone, right? These are the guys that have to play him night in, night out. Yeah,
And when you think about
that's
it,
yeah.
Gretzky won 5 and Lemieux won 4. Those are the only other 2 players in NHL history who've won at least 4, and they probably both would have won more if they played in separate eras, but because their careers crossed over, they were sort of taking the trophy away from each other at times, and McDavid really has no peer or equal the way that Lemieux eventually came up and pushed Gretzky. So it seems very likely that he will break Gretzky's record and win 6 or more Ted Lindsay awards in his career.
Yeah, he's a cut above, right? And it just shows. I mean, to have 4 by the time he's 26 is just unbelievable. And other than a year, arguably he could have won it the year prior, right? And he didn't. Obviously, Austin Matthews got it. McDavid, I think, really took that to heart, though, and that's why he came out with the season that he had. I honestly think that's the big one, right? You could take all the hockey writers in the world, and some of them have played the game, but none of them have played against McDavid. And if you play against a guy and you still say he's the best, then clearly he's the best. Like there's no denying that. And the players have voted on him 4 times. And really, Nick Kucherov had a unbelievable year in 2018, 2019, and was deserving. And Leon Draisaitl came in and did what he had to do when McDavid, wasn't there. And Matthews, was a goal scoring machine that year and did really well. So, outside of some really unbelievable performances in the past 6 or 7 years, Connor McDavid was still, I think, the best player, easily in each of those years.
Oh, for sure. And the other big one that he's chasing right now is for the most Art Ross trophies. Gretzky's the only player in history to hit double digits. He finished with 10. And the only other two players with more Art Ross trophies in their career than McDavid are Gordie Howe and Mario Lemieux, who each have 6. It seems likely that McDavid will win at least 2 more Art Rosses in his career, which would put him only behind Gretzky. But how close do you think he can actually get to 10?
Oh, yeah. I mean, uh, it's just a matter of, how much he changes his game. I mean, he's only 26, right? And so, when you think that, by the time he's 30, I don't expect him to give up the Art Ross anytime soon.
I don't think he'll lose
Knock
in the
on
next
wood.
3 years
Yeah.
minimum.
Yeah. At least 3 years, if
So
not
that takes
4.
him to 8,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then he's 29 and he's only 2 scoring titles behind Gretzky for the most ever.
And but 29 to McDavid and 29 to Wayne Gretzky are two very different things, because back in Wayne Gretzky's era, guys didn't have the same training regimen. There wasn't the same science behind fitness that there is now, and that's not to take away from Gretzky, right? It's just times have changed. And so,
I mean, Gretzky's peak season in the NHL was at age 25.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I don't think, like, 30 years old in today's game is a lot different. Guys can play a lot longer because they're in better shape. I don't expect a guy like McDavid to fall off at 27 or 28. I mean, I actually expect that he's still got a couple more years of growth, right? In
Yeah,
terms of, can he get any better? I don't know. I mean, but I do think he will find ways to get better. And he's also so committed to the craft that he'll find ways to, if his speed goes down a little bit, he'll find a different way to play the game. Like, he's just that intelligent and that smart.
and while I don't think he's driven by stats, and he's said that multiple times, he understands that the best way he can help his team is by filling the net, and that just is the reason what drives him to score is not to see what kind of records he can chase, but to help the Oilers win. Um, when I had Gene Principe on the show back in April, we both agreed that he had at least 5 more seasons of at least 120 points. So that would take him from 26 to 31. Do you echo that he should be able to put up at least 120 or more points for the next 5 years?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I without a doubt. I mean, barring injury, for sure, he'll do it. Look, I know he said he's not about stats, and he's not. But we take that Desharnais quote, right? Like, I don't care about the stats. I just want to effing win,
Right.
right? Like, one leads to the other. When you've got that kind of drive, the stats come, right? And so you don't care about them, but they happen because all you want to do is win. And so you're going to put up the points because you're going to do what's necessary. And that's what he does. So, yeah, 120 points for the next 5 years is not just unimaginable. It's, I think, expected at
Yeah.
this point, barring any injury. I just think he's going to do still amazing things over the next 4 or 5 years.
And I don't want to give away my exact point prediction for this season because I still have a, season preview show coming up. But I will say that I do have him beating his total from this past season.
Yeah, I mean, I do as well, and it's been said on every podcast I've done in recent days, like he you just can't bet against him,
No.
right? Like he's going to continue to do what he does, and like if you said he's not capable of doing 150 and being defensive, he'll prove you wrong, right? He'll do 150 and win win the what why am I going blank on the award
Yeah,
for
Ross.
no, the defensive forward,
Oh, the Selkie.
the Selkie. Yeah, he'll be the
Too many
first guy
trophies
with
to remember.
you know get has anybody won the Art Ross and the Selkie in the same year?
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
the closest equivalent would be in basketball, where Michael Jordan won the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year award. And there's been comparisons made between Jordan and McDavid over the years with their intense drive to win and hatred for losing. Mike Dursa even wrote an article about it recently. So yeah, some of those. While I don't think that they're exact replicas of each other, I think
Yeah.
McDavid's a much better teammate than Michael Jordan was. Apparently, I will say that some of the Jordan qualities of just the work ethic and the desire to win are there with him.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think what somebody needs to whisper in his ear is that it's never been done. Right? And maybe get Draisaitl to whisper that in his ear, and McDavid will make it happen.
I would love to see it. I think the only thing that would hold him back is that perhaps the writers wouldn't want to give the best defensive forward award to the scoring champion as well. But if there was, because Yari Curry really should have won multiple Selkies back in the 80s.
Yeah.
He never did. And I think part of that was because the Oilers were already winning so many trophies as it is. You had Gretzky winning the Hart every year and the Art Ross every year. And Paul Coffey won multiple Norrises, Grant Fuhr with a Vezina. So it's like, how many more awards are we really going to give to the Oilers?
Yeah, it's the human condition, right? Like you hope for the leaders to fail. Like when Tiger Woods was absolutely dominating golf, people would watch in hopes that he'd miss a putt or screw up a drive, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a non-Oilers fan, then you just hope that something doesn't go McDavid's way. And that, people are not immune to that just because they're writers or
I think it
media.
goes beyond sports too. I mean, even for singers or bands or just anyone in the public eye, if you reach the top of your field, there's going to be tons of people that love you, but you're also going to have a lot of haters as well.
That's yeah, exactly, 100%. And so, I think that that's expected. I think he'll always come up against that, and just like the one guy that would vote against him, not just vote against him, but put him in fifth.
Yeah. Ridiculous. And there was also a touching moment at the end of the NHL awards when the Stelter family flew down to Nashville from Edmonton to surprise McDavid on stage, and Mike Stelter, the father of Oilers' good luck charm and superfan Ben Stelter, presented McDavid with the Hart Trophy. And while it was great to see McDavid receive the most prestigious individual award in hockey, having the Stelters there made it extra special, didn't it?
It sure did. Yeah, it's good to see. I think that especially in a time when hockey and hockey culture certainly has all eyes pointed at it, and for good reason. These stories are endearing and need to be told and need to be seen. And that the whole city got around that. I don't know if people around the league that watched the awards if they fully grasped what what that meant. But we saw the emotion in McDavid, a number of times. You know, when it came to the Stelter family and so yeah, no, that was great. I think that was a great touch to what ended up being a disappointing year. I think for the Oilers.
Yeah, and McDavid even admitted during his acceptance speech that he got a little emotional when the Stelters walked out on stage, and he obviously had a very close bond with little Ben, and it was tragic to lose him just over a year ago. But um, it was great to see McDavid and Spit and Chicklets co-host Paul Bissonnette each donate $5,000 to the Ben Stelter Fund after he thanked his hot tub, which was a reference to an inside joke between the two of them, and so that was great. And my other favorite part of his speech is when he said he couldn't wait to get back to work with his teammates in September because they have unfinished business, and I think that shows early on with the captain skates here that they couldn't wait to get back to work. And to me, that shows there's only one trophy McDavid really wants to win, and he plans on lifting that on the ice next June.
Yeah. Yeah. Draisaitl backtracked a little bit on his own words, but these guys are here and they're committed to this year. It's going to be, I just think it's going to be a different season all around. And this will be an exciting year to be an Oilers fan. Something will have to go incredibly wrong for them not to have like a hell of a season and a hell of a playoffs. Whether they go to the Stanley Cup, Ken Holland's always quick to say there's 31 other teams, right? But it's just going to be one of those years. I think all the pieces are there, the commitment's there, the team is rolling through. Like it's all the guys that were there last year, minus a couple of faces and a couple of new ones. But I can't see this not just being being a special regular season, and then you just hope that it continues to click throughout the playoffs.
I couldn't agree more. And although they didn't take home any hardware this year, two other Oilers players were nominated for awards. Stuart Skinner was the first runner-up for the Calder Memorial Trophy as Rookie of the Year, and Darnell Nurse was a finalist for the King Clancy Memorial Trophy as Best Leader and Humanitarian in his community. So it's great to see that a couple other Oilers being recognized for the seasons they had.
Yeah, I love the King Clancy Award. Is I think it's great. I think it's a good one. Darnell Nurse is, just to hear some of the stuff that he does outside of the game is phenomenal. Some people I've seen comments like, "Who cares if he's a nice guy?" Well, I do care, right?
Mhm.
If he wasn't, we'd hear about that too. And so I care when they're good people, and seeing Darnell Nurse, even just getting a nomination like that's important.
I
Skinner,
believe it's the second
yeah.
straight year he was nominated too.
Oh yeah, because he's deserving, right? Like it's meaningful to him. I think it's part of the family DNA, like the Nurse family DNA. I
Yeah.
think they're all just really great people that like to give back.
Along with being super athletes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I- they are super athletes, and I think if you're thankful for the gifts that you're given, that comes out. And Darnell Nurse just seems to, represent gratitude in everything he does, despite having his fair share of detractors in oil country. But yeah, and Stuart Skinner, the Calder, the nomination for it. That's awesome. I didn't expect him to win, but to be nominated is something special. And he had I think he had a hell of a season for a young goalie. I think there were a lot of times where he could have easily folded under pressure, and he didn't. He just sort of stayed calm and collected. And I think this year with Campbell hopefully coming back refreshed, and everybody seems to be talking about how much better he looks and seems. The two of them together should be a really good force and hopefully feed off of each other. And I believe, and I think you follow these things closer than I do, but I believe they're pretty close friends as well.
Yeah, it sure seems that way. You know, they've mentioned it in interviews that they really lean on each other, and you know, they both went through rough patches last year, and they both went through strong runs. Let's not forget that Jack Campbell was playing great in January, while Stuart Skinner was missing a little bit of time while he flew back from a road trip to be with his wife for the birth of their child. Um, and you know, that's when Jack Campbell really got his game back on track for about a month there. And even in the playoffs, he only played in 4 games, all relief appearances, and he looked strong in each of those games that he got into. So I think that is a good confidence builder for him going into this season, that he was able to play well, and especially in a game 4 against the Kings, he shut the door and allowed the Oilers to get back into that game. And I've said that, you know, despite what he did all regular season, just keeping the Oilers alive in that series, he was worth the contract last year just for winning that game alone.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I 100% agree. Yeah, it's it's going to be an interesting year, as far as that's concerned. And I think that, I've said this so many times, like everybody looks at goalies in Edmonton as, and some people are, tough on Schwartz or tough on various different things, tough on Holland, right? Like, but the reality is like a goalie is only as good as the defense in front of them as well, right? So the defense is far different this year than it was last year.
I think it's better
Given
too. I mean,
given the
having
fact that
Ekholm
Ekholm will be
right from
there.
the
Yeah.
start, that's
Yeah.
that's the biggest difference, right? And I think Darnell Nurse still had a quietly good season last year. It's just it it gets to a point where every little mistake you make gets picked apart. Once someone makes up their mind about a player, it's very hard for them to change. So even if he's playing very well for a long stretch of time, if he has a costly turnover that leads to a goal against or a good scoring chance, you know the comments are going to come out.
Yeah, well, if you watch a an Oilers game, you got a 50% chance, this is pre-Ekholm, of seeing Darnell Nurse on the ice.
Yeah,
And so, if there's a mistake that's going to be made, it's going to be somebody that's on the ice, and Darnell Nurse most of the time was out there. So, yeah, he made some mistakes. There were games where I was particularly critical of him. But for the most part, and we talked about this on the Tuesday show of Oilers Live, is like overall, he's one of the few top pairing defensemen in this league that doesn't have another top pairing defenseman play with him. And then he
mhm,
plays, half the game. So I'm just surprised he doesn't make more mistakes, I guess.
right.
Right? Like,
And I
yeah,
and I know people like to comment on his contract and
yeah,
everything, but a as the salary cap continues to rise, his cap hit, the percentage that it takes up, it just goes down year after year. So it becomes less of a burden all the time. And really, if that was the cost of keeping him at the time, because that was the market value for a defenseman, then that's what they had to pay him. Uh, I mean, obviously, you probably would like maybe $2 million less. Uh, not just because of him, but just in general, you'd prefer to not have a $9 million defenseman on the team. And you know, if Evan Bouchard takes off in the next couple of years, he might be right there too. But it's just it was a fact of the time of what he was worth on the market, and he got paid.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not going to fault him for that. I mean, if
No,
somebody
I never
offered
fault
me,
anyone for for getting paid what they're worth, or at least what
right,
the market dictates, right?
yeah. And who else were we going to get? That's I think,
That's the biggest thing.
yeah,
Anyone who claims that this team is better without him, I can't agree with that. The You can look at how this team played when Darnell Nurse got hurt 4 games before the playoffs last year in 2022.
yep,
That was a big hole for the Oilers, and he made it back
Huge.
in time,
Yeah.
but he wasn't right for that entire playoff run.
And who like, I can't think of who's more valuable to a team. And I mark my words, I guess, is that Darnell Nurse is going to have a career year in terms of what he looks like as a defenseman, right? It might not be on the points thing, but by the end of this season, the league will know just how good Darnell Nurse is. And all of that because he doesn't have to play the, 50 minutes a game and
Yeah.
he'll be utilized properly for a guy of his skill set. Uh yeah. I just think this is going to be his year. This is going to be the year where everybody will eat their words on what Darnell Nurse's value is.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Oilers' off-season moves now, and we'll start by talking about their most notable subtractions. The Oilers traded Kyler Yamamoto and Klim Kostin to the Detroit Red Wings for future considerations on June 29th. I'll ask you about Yamamoto first, since he was with the organization longer. Yamamoto was coming off an injury-riddled season where he had just 10 goals and 25 points in 58 games. He had 1 year remaining on his contract with a cap hit of $3.1 million. Michael, were the Oilers like they're obviously looking to clear cap space, but were you hoping that the Oilers would keep Yamamoto and trade another contract, or did you think that they needed to move on from the player at that time?
Ah, you know, I preface it by saying I like Yamamoto. I like the style of play that he has. I think that it's a good move for the Oilers for him to be off the team for a couple of reasons. You have a player like that who, we talked a lot about how McDavid liked to play with him, Draisaitl liked to play with him. I think it puts the coaching staff in an awkward position where you're putting a guy out there who isn't producing points. And that somebody of his point production is going to be available at significantly fewer dollars and possibly not give you the same fits and starts that Yamamoto did in the lineup, and maybe make it a little bit easier on Woodcroft in terms of utilization up and down the lineup. I think he had to go. So as much as I liked Yamamoto and wish him the best, I think it was the only move that could be made.
Yeah, for sure. And Yamamoto did a lot of things well that don't always show up on the score sheet too. I mean, he hunted pucks like crazy.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to go to the dirty areas on the ice despite his smaller frame. He was one of Edmonton's best penalty killers, and he could tip pucks. But when you're one of the highest paid wingers on the team, you need to produce more than he did playing with McDavid and Draisaitl. That's a plum job, getting to be riding shotgun with two scoring champions or two MVPs. And, maybe if he was healthy all year, he would have scored 20 goals again. But I think the Oilers needed to get an upgrade on the right side. And they didn't want to be paying Yamamoto $3 million to play in the bottom six. So they really had no choice but to move on from him.
Yeah, those are exactly the points. Yeah, and there's a lot of maybes in this league, but you just can't pay for maybes. You got to pay for sure things, or at least get the right contract value for that dollar, right? And Yamamoto wasn't the guy, unfortunately.
And Costin was also sent to Detroit in that trade. He tallied 11 goals and 21 points in 57 games last season. And Costin was clearly the sweetener in the deal with the Red Wings in exchange for taking Yamamoto's contract off the books. How much do you think the Oilers will miss Costin's size, speed, and scoring touch this season?
Yeah, initially when he left, that was the first thing that went through my head. But with the moves and just looking at how the team is created and coming to the realization that Evander Kane should be spending a full year with the Oilers and feeling better, you hope. Connor Brown, is I think brings a new dynamic. If any one of the PTOs fits in, like Gagne or Sutter, two hard nosed players. they can all fill in a little bit by committee on some of that big toughness. I like Costin too. Like, he was fun to watch, but again, a product of a salary cap that he had to go. But I just don't think that they lost a ton of size by what they're bringing back in,
Yeah.
or grit. Maybe the size is gone, but the grit, the grit
Right.
would be there. Yeah.
Uh, Definitely. And I mean, he was a really nice fit in the Oilers' bottom six last season, and he gave them more of a physical presence. But I mean, he did become a fan favorite. We can't deny it. He was a big, rugged winger who could score a bit, and but when he was reportedly asking for 2 million a season, you can't be paying a fourth liner that type of money, especially for a team like the Oilers with not much cap room available. They just simply couldn't justify giving him that type of contract. And I can't blame the guy for wanting to get paid, but I wish he would have valued the opportunity to win a cup with the Oilers right now over going to a team that's probably going to miss the playoffs for a significant raise. And he's still only 24, so he easily could have cashed in a year from now when the salary cap goes up. But I think the Oilers will miss some of his truculence this season.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think if he had kind of bet on himself,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, I think that a year, maybe 2 years from now, he'd probably blow that $2 million mark out of the water, you know?
And maybe it's because he
Yeah.
spent 5 years in the AHL that he wanted to start making some real money, and I
Yeah.
totally understand that. But when when you look at the situation in Detroit and the teams that they have to jump over just to even get into the playoffs, as opposed to being on a legit Stanley Cup champ or contender right now, and a team that you scored a couple big goals for in the playoffs. I don't know. I just it puzzles me a little bit why he didn't think that it would be a better decision to stay with the Oilers for now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably played in to why it took a little while to come to some number, right? Like, we had talked about it early on in the off season, when he'd be signed and for how much, and we had hope. And I think probably that was the hope that Holland was, giving him, right? And at the end of the day, we don't know what's going on in their lives or what they need the money for. Their careers are short, and so um, while we say it's easy enough to bet on yourself for a couple of years, you don't know if injury is going to take that away from you or not. So seeing that upfront money might be worthwhile, right? And
Yeah.
and look, I can't. I'm not making those $2 million decisions
No,
on a
no.
salary, so I can't really comment on that. But I think that probably played into the delay of whether or not we found out if he was going to be an Oiler or not.
Takes you at least a couple years to make that money, right?
That's right. That's right.
And Nick Bukestad signed a 2-year deal with the Arizona Coyotes that carries a $2.1 million cap hit on July 1st. Bukestad returns to the Coyotes after being acquired by the Oilers at the trade deadline. And actually, I heard the news of the trade on the radio while back in March while I was driving from Saskatoon to Edmonton to play in the Heavy Hockey Showdown. And a couple nights later, he set a franchise record going 10 for 10 on faceoffs. Michael, do you think that the loss of Bukestad will leave a noticeable hole in the lineup, or do you think they'll be able to replace him internally?
Oh yeah, no, same reason why we're replacing Costin. I think there's just enough guys and enough grit in the PTOs and the team that these guys won't be noticed. And look, if they are, they're deadline type of acquisitions, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of acquisition you can, those are the acquisitions that are easier to make at the deadline time than they are to make right now, right? And so I'm fine with who they have going into the season. You check it out, you see, you've got some time. They're going to win games, right? They're going to win games early and they're going to win lots. I think I've never felt more confident, knock on wood, that this team is going into the season and they're going to get a playoff spot. They're going to know they're in a playoff spot early enough and keep the pedal down,
Yeah.
right? And give themselves the opportunity to be buyers again at the deadline, where they don't need to necessarily be buyers, but tinkerers, right? And they can tinker on players like Bugstad or Costin, and look at at least if you're looking for a guy like a Bugstad at the deadline, it's not going to cost you a first rounder,
No, and Bob
right?
Stauffer hinted on his show the other day that the Oilers will likely look at trading their 2024 first round pick for a right shot defenseman to really bolster the blue line going into the
Oh, that
playoffs.
would
And if
be
they,
fantastic.
yeah, and I mean, they already did that last year to get Ekholm here. And if they can find this year's version of Ekholm, that shows you what a transformation your decor could have in a span of 12 months. I mean, look at the Oilers on the wings from the time they played the Jets in the 2021 playoffs till now. They didn't have Evander Kane at that time. They didn't have Zach Hyman at that time. They didn't have Connor Brown at that time. They've added all of those guys. And now compare that to what the decor could also look like. If they can find another player who's at the same level of Ekholm or even a little lower, that would be just a huge difference. And it would give them the upgrade over Cody Ceci that they probably need in the top pairing to be a legit cup contender.
Yeah, Cody Cece's not a top pairing D man. He's played well.
Yeah,
He's
he
played,
exceeded
yeah,
expectations 2 years ago. He was arguably the Oilers' best all-around defenseman in 2021-22. Took a bit of a step back this year, although there were rumors that he was playing through a lingering injury all
yeah,
season. But that being said, I mean, I'm not saying that Cody Ceci has to go. I mean, if he's needed to be shipped out in a deal for an upgrade on the blue line just so that they can make the money work, then I'm totally fine with that. It's sort of like how Tyson Barrie had to go. It wasn't necessarily even because Nashville needed a power play quarterback to fit the role that Barrie would be bringing in for. They already had Romy Josi. But if the Oilers were going to fit Ekholm's $6 million cap hit under their cap, then they had to be trading Barry out.
yeah, yeah. That's true.
And that's pretty much the same situation that I think Cody Ceci could be in if the Oilers do end up trying to upgrade the right D spot, because Bouchard's not going anywhere, and I don't think that Desharnais will be going anywhere. I mean, he's more of a lower in the lineup 6-7 type D man, but still, like he brings a special skill set as a huge penalty killer on the back end, and uh, his cap hit is so low that it wouldn't really need to be included in any deal.
When it was a little controversial when I said it a ways back, I said somebody had asked me if I thought this team, how it currently is created, could win the Stanley Cup, and I said no. I said I don't see this as a Stanley Cup winning team. I see it as a playoff team, and in my mind, that's all it needs to be, right? And Cody Ceci, if he's the guy that goes at the deadline for that right shot D, the stud D that you're really looking for, then that's what it was. Last year it was Barrie, right? And you make those changes at the deadline closer to the playoffs, and that's when you become a Stanley Cup winning team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the deadline is where it is, right? So that you have it kind of a part of the season to see what you have and make the additions and changes. This team, we don't talk about it much. Well, we do talk about it a lot, but the other big thing that we haven't been talking about is that when we get to the deadline this year, we're going into the deadline with a team that Jackson also has his fingerprints on,
Yeah.
right? And that means that we're going to go in with more data, I think, right? We're going to go in with a keener eye to what it takes to win a championship. And so, while I don't think this is a Stanley Cup winning team today, I don't think it needs to be. It just needs to be a
Right.
playoff team.
And the final roster player who left the organization this offseason was Devin Shore. He signed a one-year deal for $775,000 with the Seattle Kraken on August 31st. Michael, by all accounts, Shore was a very popular teammate in Edmonton. You even saw him in Instagram pictures at Connor McDavid's lake house in Ontario this summer. But as they as the team continues to get better, I just didn't see a spot for him in the lineup going forward. How about you?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, I mean that's exactly where it is. It was people would groan when Shore got called up or called into the lineup. He was certainly a favorite. Players did love him. They still love him, and they can still love him going forward. They can, he can hang out with the team and do all of that in the off season.
Right.
Um, but it's just about being serious about going the next level, and I think Shore probably knows that
Oh,
he
he's
only
a
had
pro.
so much
He's
time to play, right?
when you've played
Yeah.
7, 8 years in the league, you get it. I think he understands where he's at in his career. Like, he's 29 now, so, he's had a decent career to this point. I don't know how many more NHL games he has left in him. Hopefully, he gets a little bit of a chance in Seattle because he's a likable guy, and like you said, Oilers fans, have loved him, during the 3 years he was here, but Uh, I don't think that he holds any grudges about the team moving on from him. It just that's just how it goes. When you want to build a championship team, you constantly need to be upgrading your roster, and that even goes for the 13th forward spot. So if Shore's not going to bring much offense, he's never going to shortchange you for effort. But this is a guy who isn't going to be a piece going forward. So it's better that he move on now and find another organization where he might be able to fit in.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody on this team, would have feels anything but just happy that he found a place to land. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of former Oilers there too. I mean, Jordan Everly,
Yep.
Adam Larson,
Mhm.
Justin Schultz, now Kyler Yamamoto. So there'll be a few faces that he'll recognize there.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about how many former Oilers are there until you put it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Well, it just gives us even more incentive to beat those guys again
Oh yeah.
next season. I think the Oilers won three out of four against them last year, and
Yeah.
there was one game where the Oilers really just jumped out to a 3-0 lead about 5 minutes into the game. It was McDavid's only 5-point game of the season last year. It was somewhere around late December, I think. But yeah, always fun beating a new divisional rival, especially because in just their second year in the league, another expansion team becomes a quality playoff team. It's just like not to the extent that Vegas was 5 or 6 years ago, but they've turned it around quickly. I mean, look, in their second season in the league, they knocked out the defending Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah. And when I think about the Kraken, I think they're, you know, in a way they had the league knew what to expect with an expansion franchise, so they didn't
Yeah,
quite have the same leg up that Vegas had. And so I think they've done a fantastic job of putting it all together in the time that they've had. Um, yeah, in fact, I'd say that they've done a better job because of what everybody else knew when they went into it.
right. Uh, okay, and moving on to the Oilers signings now. And GM Ken Holland kicked off the offseason by signing pending UFA Derek Ryan to a 2-year contract extension with a cap hit of 900,000 on June 13th. Michael, with competition for the fourth line center spot, do you still see Ryan as the favorite to hold on to that role? And are you at all concerned about giving multiple years to a player who turns 37 in December?
No, I'm not concerned. I think everybody a couple of years ago was yelling at Holland whether he's all in or not, right? And give away, spend to the cap now, and whether it's if you have to get a guy for 2 years, because of the way that it's going to work out, than do it. As I said before, guys are in better shape than they ever were. So I'm not totally worried about Derek Ryan, dropping off in a year from now.
He's also
Uh,
beat the odds his entire career, so
yeah,
he's a guy that I feel comfortable betting on to do it again.
yeah. I mean, we just talked about Devon Shore. I mean, I think Derek Ryan's a much more serviceable player than Devon Shore.
For sure.
And he, when he's last year, he had some brilliant stretches, right, where he was, a very noticeably good player for the Oilers, and I think he'll have much of the same this year.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that just comes to play every night, and you love to see it. And I think in some ways that bottom six of the Oilers sort of rises and falls with Derek Ryan. Like he's that kind of a leader and that kind of a vet.
Yeah, I mean, the Oilers do have a lot of centers under contract,
Yeah.
so there will be battles for spots in training camp. And I think internal competition is a good thing, though. And Ryan's experience in the league and time spent with the organization probably still gives him the inside track to win the job. I mean, he scored 13 goals last season in a fourth line role, which is
I know.
only 2 goals off his career high.
Yeah.
He's great in the face-off circle. He's a strong defensive presence and a tenacious forechecker. He gets pucks back and he takes them hard to the net. So I still expect him to be a useful player for the Oilers this season. And as for the second year on that deal, if his game drops off a year from now, they can easily bury his contract in the AHL because his cap hit is so low. And he might even just choose to retire if that happens. But with the salary cap expected to increase significantly, I think that they might just be fine keeping him as a depth forward if they find a better fit for the fourth line center spot by that time.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
The Oilers then signed another pending UFA, Matthias Janmark, to a 1-year contract extension worth $1 million on June 30th, 2 days before the free agent period started. Janmark took a $250,000 pay cut from last season to stay with the Oilers. Michael, he's not a player who's going to wow you offensively, but Janmark is the type of reliable veteran presence that teams with cup aspirations need to fill out their lineup, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and he's not that far removed from having played, top line minutes with Vegas, right? Like
Yeah.
he had to fill in and play on the top line quite a few games the year prior. He's just that guy that can go up and down the lineup. I think he does what you need him to do. He's definitely not getting any younger, right? I think you can see him slowing down a little bit as I talk about everybody being a little bit more fit in their later years. But I like the signing. I like him being on the Oilers team. I think he's the kind of player we need to kind of round out this team. And if he needs to play a couple games on the second line for whatever reason, he can do that. He's a good player, and he's not going to wow anybody, but
Right.
look, he was flirting around that half point a game mark last year, and that's not too bad for a guy that's
Yeah,
29.
he's definitely not a flash and dash player, and there are a lot of nights where he's not overly noticeable, but he's a solid defensive-minded forward. He can kill penalties. He typically makes the safe play with the puck, and
Hmm.
he still scored 10 goals in 66 games last season. So I think we can reasonably expect him to hit double digits again this year, especially if he plays all 82. And whenever Jay Woodcroft wants to go with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, Yanmark can get a couple shifts with either McDavid or Draisaitl, and I actually thought he worked pretty well with McDavid last year. They cashed in on a couple 2-on-1 rushes, and there's also he's been on some deep playoff runs with Dallas and Vegas in recent years, and that type of experience is invaluable. And it's just a shame he got injured blocking a shot in Game 1 against LA last spring
Yeah,
because I think he would have really helped in that series.
yeah, agreed.
All right, and the Oilers made their biggest off-season addition uh, on July 1st, signing Connor Brown to a one-year contract worth 775,000 with games played bonuses that will carry over to next season if he does play in 10 games this season, which he should easily clear. The contract would be worth as much as $4 million. And according to Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman, the Oilers had a deal in place to acquire Brown the previous summer before the Ottawa Senators eventually dealt him to the Washington Capitals instead. But now he's finally an Oiler and he is reunited with his former junior teammate, Connor McDavid. What are your expectations for Brown this season, and where do you see him slotting into the lineup?
Yeah. That's a big question. And it's all of a like a choose your own adventure with Connor Brown. The reason the contract is the way it is you want to make sure he's gonna. It's a low game count for him to meet, but there's still a little bit of a concern, I think, in everybody's mind whether he'll you know be injury free for the season. And if he is, then I think he's going to be a successful player. Where he plays, I think depends 100% on the first 10 games of the season, maybe the first 5 games of the season. I think he'll play. Definitely get a first couple games on the top line, and if he slots in nicely there, then it could be the thing that puts the Oilers over the top. If he doesn't fit in perfectly on that top line, we'll see him move around, first, second, and third line all season. And I think he'll have a middling season, one that's not, for his salary this season will be worth it. The question will be, how much do we pay for it next year? And I expect him. If you gave me an over and under on the points, if he's around that 45-point mark, I'd be happy.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an all-in year for the Oilers, so they're not worried about what the cap is going to be next season or the cap penalty with this carrying over. They're worried about having a top six forward at league minimum, and that's a great deal for right now.
Yeah.
And knowing what, like, I think he will spend the majority of the season in the top six, but knowing how Woodcroft likes to change up his lines, he'll probably have several different line mates throughout the season. However, the Oilers brought in Brown to play with McDavid. That to me is very clear. There was surely uh, other teams that could offer him more money, but one thing that the Oilers could offer him that no one else could is the opportunity to play with the best player in the world. And that had to be a big factor in why he decided to sign with Edmonton, along with the chance to win. So I would start Brown right on the top line with McDavid and Evander Kane. I think putting him in that position would be a great way to build up his offensive confidence after missing virtually all of last season with a torn ACL. And stylistically, I think Brown is close to a perfect fit to play with McDavid too. He has excellent hockey sense, soft hands, above average speed. He turns over pucks in the neutral zone, which often lead to chances the other way. He's aggressive on the forecheck, and maybe most importantly, he has excellent finishing ability in tight to the crease. And the fact that McDavid and Brown played together before, even if it was almost a decade ago, is also a positive. So I'm with you. I'm going to say Brown will put up 20 to 25 goals and 45 to 50 points, right around there.
And if you look at, the change, we talked about the change in the roster. He's taking Yamamoto's spot in that top six.
Yeah.
He's a better player. Like, there's no doubt in my mind he's a better player. He brings a lot of different things to the lineup. And so, for this year's cap hit, it's a brilliant move. The biggest question mark is injury.
Yes, although he has been relatively healthy throughout his NHL career, other than the one freak accident last year where he missed the final 78 games with, like I said, the torn ACL. So
Yeah.
as long as he's healed from that, and apparently it was a clean tear, so there wasn't any ligament damage or anything, and reportedly he feels great and has felt pretty good for a while now. So, I mean, we won't know until he actually gets into a competitive game, which he hasn't played since I think he got hurt on October 4th last year. So it's been quite a while. But overall, I like this bet by the team. I think that getting a guy who can fill a top six role and possibly score you 20 goals for just 775,000, that helps the team a lot this year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100%. Yeah. And as I said, I can't, it's an upgrade from Yamamoto.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, if you want to upgrade your top six, that's how you have to do it.
without a doubt. And still on the first day of free agency, the Oilers inked UFA forwards Drake Caggiula and Lane Peterson to league minimum contracts. Given that the Oilers are expected to run a shorter roster again this season due to cap constraints, do you see either Caggiula or Peterson making the team out of camp?
No, I mean, yeah, camp's always kind of a funny thing. But no, not out of camp. We'll see. I think both of them spend some time on the roster, varying points in the season. I'm excited to see Kajula. Who knows what being back in Edmonton does for him, in terms of the play, etc. But yeah, I just don't see him making the opening day lineup given what we have. Peterson, maybe, I guess, just because he can play center. But I think one of the PTOs will more than likely play on that fourth line center, and then of course if Woodcroft and the coaching staff are going 11-7, then that's the odd one out.
Right. Well, I mean, Oilers fans are going to be more familiar with Caggiula because he played here for parts of 3 seasons. But at this stage of his career, he's more of a replacement level player. So I expect he'll spend the majority of the season in Bakersfield, where he should still be able to contribute offensively. If you look at his numbers in the AHL last year, they were pretty good for that level. And I think he can also mentor the team's prospects. As for Peterson, he's another right shot center, which helps his chances to make the team, although he might end up playing on the wing too, as you kind of mentioned. And I think if Woodcroft does decide to run that 11-7 alignment, it could be even harder for him to stick in the lineup because I don't see him getting in over a guy like Derek Ryan or Warren Fogle or whoever they're going to have down there on the fourth line, if you want to call it that, or the final pairing, forward pairing. So yeah, it's going to be tough for him on those circumstances. But I think that both of them have a chance to play in some NHL games. I'd bet on Peterson playing in more NHL games than Kachula this year,
Yeah,
but I don't think that he'll be a regular in the lineup.
yeah, no, and that's exactly how it's likely to play out. And look, if you're your Woodcroft and you want a player in the lineup on a home game night that might spark the fans a little bit and make things a little bit fun, then throw Kajula in there, right? There's some added benefit to that. I think Edmonton fans like him, like the idea of him being back with the Oilers organization, just like they like the idea of Gagne being back in the Oilers organization, and don't discount the emotional charge that these guys bring at home when they play.
Without a doubt, yeah. And after a fairly quiet rest of July, the Oilers re-signed RFA Ryan McLeod to a 2-year contract with a cap hit of $2.1 million on August 1st. Michael, we've watched McLeod steadily improve over the past 3 seasons with the Oilers, but do you think this is the year he takes a larger step forward as an NHL player and locks down that third line center spot?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, he's only 23, and he's given the Oilers some good years. I think he's better than I expected him to be, right?
I mean, just
He's
making it to the league
Yeah,
as a second round pick, the Oilers haven't turned a lot of picks outside of the first round into NHL players. So he's kind of even beat the odds there for this
Absolutely.
organization, and
Yeah.
that's something we'd like to see a little bit more of, especially with some of the later round picks that are looking promising in the Oilers system right now. But yeah, it's just even getting there is the first thing, and if he can take it another step forward now as a pro, that's what huge for the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just it. Just take it the other step. I think, if as much as we know the players, but he's going to want to play for his contract, right?
Right.
Prove that he's worth the 2.1 they've spent. And I think he is. He's definitely I think he'd play third line center on just about any team in the league. And the thing I've said every time I've talked about him that I love is if you need him to play up and down the lineup, he can. He's versatile. He's good defensively. He comes to play every night. He's a hard worker. He's got a hell of a smile. He's got all of the traits of you know NHL player that's going to be around every year for a while.
Yeah.
And
And I mean
I'm excited to watch him grow.
he's a kid from the Toronto area who grew up an Oilers fan and a Ryan Smith fan too. So how can you not love that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like, I go back to he's only 23,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, well, I guess he'll be 24. I'm looking at his
Yeah,
stats here in a couple of
he's a
days.
2018
Yeah.
draft pick, so he's
Yeah.
turning
Turns
24
24 in 6 days. So happy birthday, Ryan.
Happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Um, and I mean, the Oilers have the best 1-2 combination down the middle in the league with McDavid and Draisaitl, but McLeod has a golden opportunity to secure that third line center spot for the next 5 to 7 years or so. And I mean, he's an emerging talent with still room to grow, and he has speed to burn. He can skate the puck up the ice with ease. He's responsible in his own end, and he's constantly evolved down low in his own zone. He's big, though he's not overly physical, and I think that's an area he needs to improve this season. And that doesn't mean he just has to throw a ton of hits, but he needs to be more engaged in puck battles and go into the dirty areas more consistently. If he had a little bit of what Yamamoto brought in that area, that would make him such a more effective player. And it might never be the type of guy he is, but just like I said, you don't have to go out there and hit everyone in sight, but just be there, be in the battle. And while I don't think he's ever going to be a big point producer either, I think he has the potential to put up 40 points a season, especially if they can find him some wingers who can finish their chances.
Yeah. Yeah, and playing on that third line, right, is it's all about that, right? If you get a third line that ends up with some chemistry, and I think McLeod and Fogle at times had really good chemistry last year.
And some of these guys they've
Yeah.
got in the system, like if eventually one of them breaks into the lineup, like Xavier Bourgault or a Raphael Lavoie, or eventually Matvey Petrov or Ty Tulio or Carter Savoy, like
Hmm.
they have these young skilled wingers that are basically all fighting for the same one or two jobs on any given year. And if a couple of those guys were to end up on his wing, well, I mean, that's the type of skill on your third line that you'd like to have playing with him, and then that's when he really would have a chance to maybe hit 40 points.
Yeah, and I hadn't really thought about it that way, but if you get some of these guys, because there's some talent there. I mean, obviously the prospect cupboards aren't as full and stocked as we'd like, but that's a product of going for it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is
I
some
do,
talent there that'll be
and
good.
I do like that the Oilers. Well, I mean, Tyler Wright, who exited the organization recently, and like I said, I'm going to talk more about that with Spencer Promoting when he's on the show. But uh, you won't really know how the draft picks turned out until 5 years after. That's when you can really evaluate it. And like they might have missed on a few, or you can argue that there were players that they should have taken ahead of the guys that the Oilers picked in those spots. But with their depth picks, I like a lot of the flyers that they've taken on some of these guys, like a guy like Tulio Savoy in the fourth round, Tulio in the
Hmm.
fifth round a couple of years ago, Petrov in the sixth round. These are guys who are all skilled players, and a lot of them are shooters. And that seemed like that was the mentality from the Oilers' amateur scouting staff, is to draft goal scorers, draft guys who can put the puck in the net, and that's probably driven by the fact that you have two world class playmakers on your team, and if you can find someone with even decent uh, shooting ability, and put them with one of those guys, it can probably take their offensive game to another level.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and those guys are great. I think Petrov is the one, yeah, that to me is the most amazing out of all of them.
Back
It
to
would be
back
great
90 point
to see
seasons.
him go somewhere. Even a guy like Stonehouse didn't, was pretty good scorer for Ottawa in the OHL. These guys in this rookie camp, it'll be exciting to see some of them and how they are. And camp often has a couple of surprises, and who knows?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Bourgault. I'd love to see how he does in camp this year.
Yeah, and I mean, last year the Oilers won the rookie tournament, which kicks off tomorrow with the Oilers rookies taking on the Jets rookies at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. But you have to remember, Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway played in that tournament. I was going to say I think Stuart Skinner did too, but I don't believe he did. And I mean, Holloway was the obvious MVP of that tournament. If you watched any of those games, he
Hmm.
was, the clear-cut best player there. And that's something that this group is not going to have, and Raphael Lavoie isn't playing in it either, and his numbers were similar to Holloway's at the NHL or the AHL level last year, so, he probably would have had a similar impact, but he's not gonna be playing now, and, as you mentioned, the Oilers have kind of filled out their roster with, some camp invites, but, it's not going to be as dominant as showing, I don't expect, as we saw a year ago.
Yeah, yeah. No, they and goaltending is pretty lackluster in terms of what's going to camp as well. So I mean, that's not what it's about, really. It's fun as a fan to see your team, whether it's even if it's rookie camp or not, win. But seeing which players really shine is kind of the better part of it. I'd like to see Borgo take a step and just be dominant out there. Is something
Yeah.
I'd like to see. I found, and I got to watch him live when he was playing in the queue.
Oh, that's right, coming to
Yeah,
Halifax.
yeah, and yeah, I got this impression from him that he was maybe a little disinterested playing at that level when he probably should have been playing in the AHL and maybe a year earlier. But I think you know, what shows maturity is when these guys, they don't play with that disinterest, and they play with the zeal to win, whether or not they're a step above. And so that's kind of what I'd like to see from Borgo, is that he
A little more
plays,
competitiveness.
yeah, a little bit more competitive, and shows that he's not supposed to be there, right? Do you know what I mean?
No. Yeah,
And that, I think, will determine how he does in the Oilers camp. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for.
but if he ever puts it all together and it clicks for him at the AHL level, that's a guy that, you'd hope to see recalled in the next year or two, and, when he does come up, man, you never know. You might put him with McDavid, and it just immediately works, and they end up playing together for the next handful of years.
Oh yeah, yeah. Another guy that I'm kind of excited about, and I mentioned him earlier, is this Stonehouse.
Yeah.
Like you know, he didn't. He kind of got passed over, right? And then now he's had a really great season playing for the 67s. He's putting the puck in the net. He's the kind of guy you really, another guy that I really want to watch for as well.
And maybe that showcases him and then he gets a contract with another organization down the road, so you never know what can come of this, but,
Yeah, that's possible.
sometimes I almost think those camp invites are actually have more to play for than, the prospects who will be returning to their junior teams.
Yeah, yeah, and he's not big. Like he's not a big player, so we'll see what happens. But I've seen some clips of him, and he looks like the kind of guy that could be a surprise, and at one time in his career play a couple of games in the NHL, do
Yeah.
something nobody's expecting.
And the Oilers re-signed RFA Evan Bouchard to a 2-year contract with a cap hit of $3.9 million on August 24th. It was the final key piece of business the Oilers had to get out of the way this summer. Michael, after watching Bouchard elevate his game to a whole new level in the playoffs, do you expect him to outperform his contract? And how high do you think he could push his point total this season?
Yeah, that's a good question. I Point total, I think, is a given that he'll get more. He's just going to play nonstop on the power play this year, and I legitimately do not expect the power play to be, if it does go down, which there doesn't feel like it's possible it could get any better. Although I'm one of the few maybe that think it will be with Bouchard back there. I think he's going to, yeah, easily outperform 40 points. Well, when I say easily, I mean I think he's going to be sitting around 50, the 50-point mark, if not more, playing a
Yeah.
full season on the power play.
I
Uh,
mean,
and then with that comb there, I mean, he, as he showed with Keith the year prior, right? If he's got the right vet on his defensive pairing, he's, perfectly capable defensively,
yeah, I
and
couldn't
shows
agree more on
other,
that point.
yeah, other benefits. So, yeah, no, I think it's a good price for a guy like Bouchard. Although I'm not sure that he'd get that same contract had he been playing for another team.
Yeah, possibly not. And after scoring 43 points in his first full NHL season in 2021-22, I thought Bouchard was going to put up 60 points last year, but he
Mm.
got off to a really slow start. And I think a big reason for his early struggles was that he went from having a former Norris Trophy winner in Duncan Keith as his defensive partner to, being the veteran on a pairing with Philip Broberg. However, once Matthias Ekholm arrived in early March, Bouchard's offensive game really took off, and I think it was a big deal for him to have Ekholm there. He was a calming presence for Bouchard on the back end, and if there was ever a defensive breakdown, Ekholm would cover for him. And of course, a big reason why Bouchard turned his season around was that he finally got the opportunity to play on the top power play unit. We mentioned that earlier about Tyson Barrie heading out the door in that Ekholm trade, and uh, Bouchard had 36 points in his final 31 games last year, including the regular season and playoffs, which was the third most points in the league by a defenseman since the start of March. And that's a 95-point pace over a full 82-game schedule. No, I'm not saying Bouchard's going to maintain that pace all season, but it's a really positive sign from him. And considering he's going to be playing a full season on the best power play unit in NHL history, I think he's a lock for 60 points, and it wouldn't shock me if he hit 70.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, it wouldn't shock me either. Look, this guy did amazing things in junior,
Yeah.
right? Like he's an offensive juggernaut, and last year, yeah, you're right. He struggled early, but once he got his confidence back, I think all was good, and it's going to be, the guy had 17 points in 12 playoff games. Granted, I mean it was all power play, but he could be, you know, he could. Would it surprise you if he was a point a game defensive player next year? I mean, maybe it would surprise you, but it's altogether possible.
I mean, playing with McDavid in his prime and having Bouchard with the skill set he has, could he hit 80 points? Yeah, I mean it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could get there, especially if the refs call, you know even half the penalties that they probably should against McDavid, then they're gonna see that power play opportunity rate go up, and they would be converting even more. I mean, what were they in the playoffs? I think they were. I don't know if they finished there, but they were in the high 50s at one point, and
Mhm.
that just took it to another level from the
It was
NHL record.
crazy. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
last year they set the NHL record last year for uh, best success rate on the power play in both the regular season and the playoffs, and it just got better in the playoffs. So I really expect that it's going to, even if it's not hovering around that 58% or whatever it finished at. I think that they have a good shot to beat that record of 32.4 again next season.
Mhm.
And the Oilers also signed 3 PTOs ahead of training camp, including former Oiler and fan favorite Sam Gagner, as well as Brandon Sutter and Adam Ernie. Do you think any of these guys have a real shot to earn a contract with the team?
Yeah. The one that I'm not altogether sure about would be Ernie. You know, you had to have. We talked about it with McCurdy on Oilers Live on Tuesday. It does smell a little bit like a pick that's meant to fill the roster out for preseason games, or not a pick, but
Yeah,
a
you got to
PTO.
have a certain
Yeah.
number of veterans on your roster. And, when the Oilers are playing 8 preseason games, you don't want to have McDavid and Draisaitl
Hmm.
playing more than 4. And you don't want them having to travel either. Like, you're not going to send them to Winnipeg or Vancouver to play a preseason game. So, yeah, I think for that purpose alone, it makes sense to bring them in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, he's a question mark. Could he play his way into the lineup? Absolutely. Sam Gagner, I think, will be an Oiler. How and what his utilization is, we'll see. And Brandon Sutter, I mean, a lot depends on whether or not he can regain some form, and if he can, then sure, why not, right? Like, I think the person that's most likely to lose a spot is Lane Peterson, right, to one of these guys, and it's quite possible, right? I mean, it's these are guys that we talked about losing Costin, and we talked about losing Bugstad. These are guys that could be, uh, good replacements for them if they have a successful season.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, for me, I would love to see Sam Gagner come back for a third tour of duty. I wrote an article about this about 13 months ago, and I released it again when the rumors started to come out in
Hmm.
August that he was going to come back again. And I just think that for a guy who has played in the league for 16 years, a good chunk of that time with the Oilers, 7 years on his first time around, and parts of 3 seasons the second time. It would be great to see him finally get to play in a playoff game with the Oilers. Like, Sam Gagner has played over 1,000 regular season games in the NHL, but he's only played in 11 playoff games and none with the Oilers. So for me, just being a fan of this guy since they drafted him in 2007, we're both born in 1989. He wears 89 on the back of his jersey. I always loved that. Um, I would I mean, the 8-point game in 2012. There's so many reasons why this guy is a fan favorite in oil country, and just I think that it just seems right for him to be able to finally play in playoff games in Edmonton. And
Hmm.
I mean, if they end up winning the cup this year, that's like that's almost a story tale to have that kind of a finish to his career. He might end up just calling it a career if he won the cup. Like, Hollywood couldn't write a better script than that, than Gagner coming back to the Oilers for a third time, and he wins a championship and then is able to kind of call it a career, and sort of transition then into a management type role, as it's been floated out there that he'll end up doing with the Oilers organization when he eventually does decide to hang up his skates. But
Yeah.
so for that reason alone, I'm hoping that Gagner does earn a contract. You might be able to argue that Brandon Sutter fits what they need even more as a sort of a defensive minded, right shot center, but I don't know, like, he's missed the last 2 seasons and with long COVID. I don't know if he what kind of shape he's in. I guess we'll see, when the preseason gets going about a week from now, but, um, I'm hoping for Sam Gagner if I'm being honest.
Yeah. I honestly, I just have zero doubt in my head that he's going to be signed with the Oilers. The
Do you think he'd agree to a two-way deal, though? Like,
No,
so that they
I
could
I
send him
think
up and
he's
down?
I think he's the guy that sits in the press box every night. You know, the second coming of Devon Shore, but
I mean,
with a
you'd
little
like
bit
to
more
have the
vet.
3 guys in the
Yeah,
press box if the Oilers had the cap room to do it,
yeah,
but, I think that he's such a team player and good soldier that he would be willing to take on that role of, sitting in the press box, even if it's 41 games a year and playing in the other 41, just to just to be back here. I mean, his wife's from Edmonton. They have connections to the city. He obviously loves being an Oiler. It'd
yep,
be great to see him come back. And like I said, we're considering where this team is right now, based on compared to the years that he suffered through earlier in his career when the Oilers were at the bottom of the standings year after year. Like I said, it would just be great to see him have the opportunity to play for the Oilers while they're a top team in the league, and hopefully have a chance to win that championship.
yeah, yeah. It would be brilliant. It really would be. Yeah.
And while we can argue that Connor Brown was the Oilers' biggest acquisition on the ice this season or this off season, their most significant addition might have been off the ice with the Oilers hiring McDavid's longtime agent Jeff Jackson as CEO of hockey operations on August 3rd. Firstly, what did you think of the decision to hire Jackson? And secondly, do you think this all but guarantees that McDavid will be an Oiler for life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't. It's hard to talk in guarantees, but I just can't see McDavid going anywhere, assuming everything goes to plan. This was much needed for the Oilers organization. Bring somebody from outside, somebody that is, a friend of McDavid, so to speak, somebody who seemingly understands, where the game of hockey is going. Somebody who's not afraid to make choices, right? That and put their stamp on the organization. It's all part of what I think is, there's a part of this team. While the team has a good history, the team needed to mature in a number of different ways, or maybe overcome that history. And this is a part of that as well, right? This is a new direction.
Yeah.
And Ken Holland, I mean, it's likely his last year in the organization. So, you need a guy like, I think, like Jackson, who can take the reins and get the team ready for the new direction that it goes, and not just about it being a cup or bust this year, but that you can parlay this into ongoing success for the organization, right? Like, so that you're, more of like a Pittsburgh Penguins type of organization rather than the
Right.
Buffalo Sabres type of organization.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this has to be viewed as one of the best front office signings in the franchise's history. Bringing in Jackson to run the organization really signals a new direction for the Oilers, in my opinion. He has more than 35 years of experience as an NHL player, a lawyer, a front office executive, and as a player agent. And his name carries considerable weight in the hockey world. Daryl Cates even said in his introductory press conference back in August that hiring Jackson represents a big commitment to the organization's long-term success. And while I'm sure he'll strengthen the Oilers' hockey operations department, his long-standing relationship with McDavid might be his most significant resource to the organization. I've always believed that McDavid would spend his entire career in Edmonton, but I'm more confident than ever that McDavid will be re-signing with the Oilers now that Jackson is in the fold.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it doesn't hurt that confidence, right? Like, it's
No.
definitely a good part of it.
Yeah, it's just bringing in his guy. You can characterize this as the Oilers are doing everything they can to make sure McDavid sticks around, and I'm sure that played a big part in it. But having a modern thinker, like you said, who uh, is willing to use analytics more to make decisions and not being afraid of new ideas and or getting stuck in the past or not being innovative in the way that they're going to build their organization from top to bottom. I think that for those reasons Jackson is a good hire for the team. And like I said, the fact that he has that relationship with McDavid that goes back more than a decade, that's just a bonus.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, there's so many bonuses to hiring a guy like Jackson, right? Like, I think even for somebody to come in that is a former agent or somebody like Jackson who's had a chance to view every part of the league from every different angle,
Yeah.
right? Like, when you're fighting for contracts and you understand, like, you have to understand the analytical side of the game because that goes into your
In negotiation.
negotiations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And now he's on the other side of that.
exactly. Yeah. So it's just
And
it's good all around. Like, there's so many good things.
And it's like you said, he's represented McDavid since 2012 when he was only 15, and their relationship will be different now because he's sort of on the other side. I mean, they're all a part of the same team, but now he's going to be, on the other side of the table when it comes to negotiating McDavid's contract, and I'm sure that they're still going to make sure that he gets paid whatever he needs to stick around, and knowing McDavid. Just from what we hear, he'll almost certainly leave money on the table again, as he did back in 2017 when he signed his first extension to give the team the best possible chance to win. But with the salary cap going up, I'm sure he'll still be paid very well.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I want to point out something. Jeff Jackson was a point a game player for the Halifax Citadels.
Well, we've given Saskatoon a few shout outs tonight. We got to get Halifax in there too.
That's right. Yeah.
And just to wrap up the show tonight, I wanted to talk about a major announcement here at the Heavy Hockey Network last week, when Heavy Hockey Network was named a friend of Edmonton Sports Talk, and I know you just had your inaugural show as a part of the Edmonton Sports Talk family on Tuesday night, and the Fantasy Hockey Hacks guys, who also are from Saskatoon, were on last night. Just, I mean, how much of a thrill is it for you after 6 years nearly 6 years, I guess, of hosting your show to see it sort of take this next step and be joining this brand new online sports radio station?
Oh, it's huge. I when I started this, it was quite literally just I wanted to do a podcast, and I was looking for something to podcast about, and arguably, some would argue this a lot. I thought that I would do it on something I thought I knew something about, which was the Edmonton Oilers. And I really got kind of lucky along the way and still continue to get lucky with the people that I've met. And so, as it's grown throughout this journey, it's been great. I would have never imagined to get just to that people would even listen. I said this to a lot of people. I expected 3 listeners on average, and all of them to be related to me. So now we're up to at least 6. And no, I mean, I joke. It's a great honor, and it's good. Dustin Nielsen, as everybody knows, is just one hell of a charismatic guy and a great guy. And Matthew Iwanek and Tom Gazzola and Lieutenant Eric and their commitment to Edmonton sports is fantastic. And if you're going to align yourself with somebody in the Edmonton sports scene, I think those are the guys to do it. And there's lots of reasons, not just how great the programming is, how connected Gazzola is, or how charismatic Nielsen is, or how much he cares about the sports and the little side part that Lieutenant Eric plays, or just how Iwanek runs the programming day to day. Like, all of them together are great. And then when we built, and I say we because I know you were a part of that, Eric, but when we built heavy hockey, and I've said this a million times, as there was always going to be a DNA and a culture to heavy hockey that was about giving back to the community
For
and
sure.
just being good people. And so, this wasn't about Dustin Nielsen and those guys asking if we wanted to be a friend of Edmonton Sports Talk. There was a piece of this discussion that had to do with, what are you guys going to do in terms of being part of our culture of giving back? And they were immediately on board with helping out with the Heavy Hockey Showdown, which is in support of the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton. So that, to me, is just fantastic as well. So I expect bigger and better things when we do that this year, which is our charity hockey game. If you're listening and you don't know what I'm talking about. So all of those things together, it's a big time, and just exciting time for heavy hockey, for Oilers Live, for Fantasy Hockey Hacks, for yourself. I think we've done something in 2 years that I never expected to do. And people talk about us, people know about us, people that I don't know personally, which is fantastic. And I love it. It's just been a really fun ride.
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure, and I mean, I'm very happy to be a part of it. I'm happy for you to see, where you've taken it. Having the fantasy hockey hacks guys on board now. I mean, I just had them on my podcast the last episode, and
They're
great to get
fantastic.
to know them. Yeah, I mean, geez, with you, Dash, myself, and those guys we're really filling our Saskatchewan content here.
Yeah.
We've definitely hit the quota for for people from the prairies, and no, it's been awesome, man. I really enjoyed your first episode with Bruce McCurdy. I mean, I mean, he's been on this show 3 times before, so we all know how great of a guest he is, and uh, would love to join you on your show sometime soon, whenever you guys need someone to fill in. And I mean, I just also want to give you a shout out too, and say, well, tomorrow is the fourth anniversary of the 99 Forever podcast, and this is your sixth appearance on the show, which is the most of any guest. So appreciate you being such a huge part of the show over the years and everything you've done. And it's been great even recording shows when I've been on your podcast as well. So just it's awesome, man. And I look forward to seeing, where we're going to go from here.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I didn't say it earlier, but congrats on 4 years. I remember,
Thank
Eric,
you.
I followed you before you ever followed me on Twitter, and for a ton of different reasons. At the time, you were writing for the Hockey Writers, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, but you've always shown that you are passionate about the sport and you understand the sport, and the passion you have for guys like Wayne Gretzky and Connor McDavid, and understanding the trajectory of their careers and how that works. I think it's great. I think it's important. I think that it's been it's been a real treat getting to know you over the past 4.5, probably 5 years now. And definitely one of the bigger parts of doing all of this. As you know, you were one of the very first people I asked to be part of heavy hockey.
Yeah,
So if not the
I
first, you might have been
I
the
mean,
first. Yeah,
I know
yeah.
I when you reached out to me in 2019 to start my own podcast, with you at the time, and heavy hockey didn't really come along until 2 years later. Even it just it meant a lot to me that you wanted me to be a part of this, and I think we've really built a strong team. Just to see how we've grown in even 2 years
Hmm.
is really impressive, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And I'm excited to see where we go from here. I think it's going to be a big season for us, and as the Oilers continue to do better, I think we're only going to do better as well.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
Well, Michael, I'm just going to say thanks again for being on the show. Good luck with your show coming up next Tuesday as well, and going forward all season. Like I said, we're getting close to talking about actual games again. So with the rookie tournament kicking off tomorrow, we'll actually have some new games to break down when we record our next episode.
Can't wait.
All right. So for Michael Hebert, I am Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.